Welcome, everyone, to the first edition of East Meets West at the VISE. Today, the 6th of March, 3 p.m. Mountain Time anyway, 5 p.m. Eastern. We have Eric Austin. He's going to do a fly called the Quack. Some of you may not have a clue what he's talking about. You will soon. And myself, Al Beatty, will be tying a Royal Coachman hair wing. Now, let me bring my good friend Eric in here. And we're the Beatties from Boise, and Eric is from Florida now. So you go right ahead, and I'll get myself out of here.
All right. You want me to get started with, can we just, all right. The first thing I wanted to discuss, I was hoping Al would stay in the picture here.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll be right back. Okay.
Yeah, this is for all of us, actually. I'd love to get opinions on this. And the other night I was doing a demo on Al's channel, and somebody asked a great question. They asked me whether I dubbed clockwise or counterclockwise. And I honestly couldn't answer it. I was pretty confident I must be doing it wrong for him to ask the question. And then another gentleman volunteered that Wayne Llewellyn has a video where he talks about the proper way to dub is clockwise. And I remembered something from years and years ago, where if you dubbed the wrong direction, as you wound the thread or the dubbed thread, then the dubbing would loosen up. So I didn't watch Wayne's video, Wayne Llewellyn. I love Wayne Llewellyn. He's one of the great tires ever. And I know he knows what he's talking about. But I decided I wanted to kind of learn for myself and prove some things to myself about clockwise, counterclockwise, etc. So I took some fur dubbing, this stuff right here, it's beaver. And it's nice. It's nice dubbing. I like it a lot. It's natural fur, with most of the guard hairs gone. And I decided I was going to do dubbing 4 different ways: right-handed clockwise, right-handed counterclockwise, left-handed clockwise, and left-handed counterclockwise, and see if I could tell a difference. And in each case, what I tried to do, and I used, by the way, I want to mention, I used Al's dubbing wax because I wanted to get as fine a body as I could with fur, which is hard to do. And I'll show you the results I got right now. This is the result I got right hand clockwise, which is the way Wayne Llewellyn says to do it. And I think it is the way, when I'm dubbing right-handed, I think this is the way I normally do it. But don't quote me. It feels natural to me. This is right hand counterclockwise. And this didn't feel quite as natural, but my right hand's pretty powerful. And I was able to get what I think is an okay body both ways. I didn't see anything unraveling, unwrapping, or anything. Now, maybe it was the wax, not sure. Here's left hand counterclockwise. And with my left hand, then, and let's compare that with the right hand clockwise. To me, there's not a dime's worth of difference here. The left hand counterclockwise, my left hand is strongest in that with a counterclockwise movement. In fact, my right hand is strongest with a clockwise movement. They're opposite. The hands work opposite of each other. And the proof is my left hand clockwise is horrible. It's twice the diameter of the others. I just don't have any strength going in a clockwise direction with my left hand. I'm right-handed, number one. But I'd love to hear other thoughts on this. Al made a great point earlier, that again, he doesn't get all worked up about whether it's clockwise or counterclockwise, as long as it goes the same direction. But he said with certain kinds of dubbing, it can make a difference. And that's something I haven't tried seal, for instance, which is tough to get dubbed tightly. So Al, what do you think? Al, I can't hear you. You're muted.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Eric. You got me on the spot, and to tell you the truth, I don't think it makes a dime bit of difference. It's how you wrap, how you feel comfortable. And when I learned to tie flies, it was out of the Herder's book at that time that came with my fly tying kit. I still got that book. It's all line drawings, and it says, twist the dubbing in one direction only. Period.
Right.
So I've got a question. Perhaps the significance of it might be the skill of the tire. Maybe someone who is not as skilled at twisting and dubbing a newer tire, it may be more important for that tire to do it in the clockwise direction with the right hand.
Yeah, and if you're right-handed, the clockwise is the strongest. There's no question in my mind.
And I think there's a couple of people we have worked with that were having trouble with their dubbing, that when they started doing it clockwise, they were more successful. But like you, I try to do clockwise, and sometimes it makes a difference, and sometimes I don't know. I think sometimes I can go counterclockwise and it doesn't make any difference.
Very honestly, when I edited the video from last Friday, which was your presentation, Eric, I thought, well, I'm going to find out about this clockwise, counterclockwise, because somebody seemed to think you were going counterclockwise. So I slowed the video down for a little bit and looked at it. You were twisting in a clockwise direction.
Well, I'm glad I was doing it correctly.
Well, I mean, I don't think there is any
Still not
correctly.
sure what correctly is.
Yeah, right.
Al?
Yeah.
Yeah, when I have tied with seal, because I do a lot of the Atlantic salmon stuff, seal, if you don't use any wax, it seems to work better if you do a clockwise. If you do it because even when you do it clockwise, sometimes I'll go up and I'll hold the very end of the dubbing tight to the thread. And as I wrap, of course, if for every wrap, it kind of goes counterclockwise to unravel. And if I don't hold on to it, then it loosens up that dubbing.
Yeah.
And sometimes
Jim,
when you're holding it, if you just let go of the dubbing, you can see it loosen up. And I think a lot of the stuff that Al, you and Gretchen work with, you're using that super tacky or tacky wax. And I think that when you twist the dubbing on, makes it tighter to begin with. And so it doesn't loosen up as much. I found when I've waxed the thread, it doesn't unravel as easily, and so if you use any of the long fibered hair, or like Angora goat, to me, I'm always tightening it up. I get about 2 or 3 wraps, and then I'll tighten it up again.
Hey, Eric, let me ask this one.
Yeah.
So I always understood the issue to be the cording and whether the the dubbing gets trapped in the cording of the thread.
I've
Now,
heard that too. Yeah.
I can understand with Jim holding the dubbing and the thread, that's going to cord as you wrap it. It's going to turn clockwise. But
I'm not arguing.
can you prove out that it actually cords up with the thread?
Yeah,
and maybe with no wax, using seal, since I do dub apparently in the clockwise direction. Seal always unravels, seemingly no matter what I do. But anyway, I am constantly I with seal, I use my left hand a lot. So I'm probably really going the wrong way with seal. I don't know. Because that's counterclockwise.
I don't think there is any wrong way.
One of my friends has told me a way that dubs a little differently. You know how they used to, or there's one author would put a noodle out and on his pant leg and get it into a long.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Okay. Then this person would attach it with one turn of thread, but it's not wrapped around the thread yet. Then what he would do is he would hold with his left hand the bobbin so that the thread would not turn, and then he used both his left first finger and thumb and his right first finger and thumb, and again put it so it would go on clockwise, but the thread would not turn because of the way he was holding the bobbin.
Wow.
And then he would pinch it to the thread, go up and over, and it would tighten up as you wrapped. And then if you just barely let go of the materials, it would unravel just slightly so that you could keep the body uniform. It was really an interesting way of making a tighter body with some of that seal and stuff.
Well, do you remember Dave Whitlock's method of dubbing, where he had a whole big clump of dubbing in his left hand? And and I mean, he would kind of dub as he rapped, as I recall, and just a little bit here. Yeah. And I've actually done that. And of course, Renee Harrop with his left-handed dubbing, and his dubbing is exquisite, or was. The family no longer ties, but I always loved Renee Harrop's flies just for the dubbing. It was incredibly beautifully done. You get these cylinders of dubbing. I've never been able to accomplish it. But maybe if I focus a little bit on clockwise, maybe that'll happen for me. I don't know.
We'll see. But right now, I think we're getting hung up on clockwise, counterclockwise, when we really started out to check an Eastern pattern and a Western pattern and see what we think. So
I'll talk a little bit about the Quack then.
Let me get myself out of here. We'll be back in just a minute when we do ours.
All right. This is the Quack. This will look very familiar to everybody, but it was a very old fly, suggested to Reuben Cross by Leonard C. Quackenbush. He was unhappy with the Royal Coachman, the Fan Wing Royal Coachman. Didn't like it and wanted Rube Cross to make him something with some sort of hair wing or a different kind of wing. And Rube Cross came up. He actually used Impala. Nowadays, and then quickly switched to calftail. But the original was done with Impala. And here's a couple different views of it. Wings are upright and divided like a Catskill fly. They're fairly high. In this case, just so you know, I've used a 2X long hook. I've used 2X long hooks ever since Fran Better's book, Fran Betters on all his wolves, including the sable wolf, actually used a streamer hook. He used what is it? Jim, maybe you can help me with this one. 9671 streamer hook. Does that sound right, Jim? Yeah. Okay.
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
9671 is 2X and 9673 is 3X.
Yeah. So anyhow, that's what I've used a Tiemco hook here, and I'll show you the recipe. I've used a 5212 Tiemco, which is 2X long, but in Mike Valla's book, sorry, I heard some. Anyway, you can also use a Tiemco 100, a standard.
I just don't think we're gonna make many boom and bust picks. I think this, just because of what's happened.
Okay, Eric, you're going to have to unmute yourself. I muted everybody there to get rid of that. And
yep, gotcha. All right. So anyhow, let's get tying this thing. I'm using Lagarton 95 denier. I like this thread. It can be flattened, which is nice. It doesn't matter with this pattern. You can use uni. You can get away with uni 8/0, but if you really want to crank this hair down, I'm going to try to. The first thing to go on is the wing material, and it's this white calf tail here. Looks like this, and I don't have a sophisticated a way of handling calf tail and measuring it as Al and Gretchen do. They'll show you their method. My method is to cut a big old hunk off of it and then get rid of a lot of what's left. And what I'll do is, and I'm sorry I can't show this, but I'll just hold it in the middle and flick the end and get rid of a lot of the short fibers down low. And then I'll do the same thing, holding it in the middle again. Up high, I might even do some hand stacking. Other than that, I don't really stack this. I just try to get a reasonable bunch. And I want this wing to be kind of high. Maybe not totally hook length, but at least to just behind the eye. And I want to keep everything on top of the hook as best I can. I'm going to twist up the thread to make it stronger. And don't ask me whether I'm twisting clockwise or counterclockwise. You could actually twist it either way as long as you went far enough. I'm pretty sure I'm twisting it in a normal direction to tighten it up, but who knows? Once I get it fairly secure on there, and that's why I'm really digging in. I'm going to do just a short taper here. Because I want to leave room for the peacock herl and all that stuff. I could have left a little more room for hackle up here at the front. I would have liked to have had this back a little more than it is, but at this point it is what it is, and we'll work with it. So as far as the winging goes, I pretty much use the same winging technique that I use for catskill flies, very similar. I'll spread, I'll try to get 2 bunches here. I'll take a diagonal, I'll set this near wing in place, take a diagonal wrap, do 1 wrap around the back of the shank, set this wing more or less in place, and take a wrap back to front. And then I'll pull them both up and just post them both up again. Now, these are now securely divided, but they're not upright and divided. In order to accomplish that, I'm going to do I'm just going to do classic figure eights, trying to keep the thread low. As I do these, because I'm starting from behind, they'll start to come more vertical and closer together. Now that kind of overcooked that. Thread, with these figure eights, it's all about thread tension. Oops, like too much on that one. You hold each wing as you do these. And right now we're getting more and more upright and more divided, or not more divided, less divided. And I think that'll work well for us. I'm going to go with this. And the next thing to go on is the tail. Now, the difference between Al's fly and this fly, or one of the differences, certainly, it may be the only difference, I'm not sure. This tail has, or this tail is hackle fibers. It's not golden pheasant tippet like the original Royal Coachman. It's not moose body hair or moose mane or any of that stuff. It's just hackle, brown hackle. And I want this to be a good hook length. And I want the loop to fall to my left. So I'm spinning the bobbin up again, which will make that loop fall the way I want it to fall, like so. And I'll take 1 loose turn and then do a harder wrap and straighten up the tail like this. And it should be dead on when I do that. I just brought the tail my way just a touch as I did a harder second wrap. Now I'm going to go all the way back to the tail.
Eric, can I just
Yes.
reiterate
Yes.
something that you just said?
Yes.
So when you were tying that tail on, you twisted your thread extra
Yes. I twist.
in the normal direction, so you were putting the twists back into it, correct?
Correct. I was twisting the thread up rather than flattening it.
And that causes where the loop is going to land when you bring
Yeah, if you go all the way one way, if you go all the way, and I hate to say this, but if you twist it like you're screwing in a light bulb, pretend the bobbin is a light bulb. If you act like you're going to screw in a light bulb, if you twist it all the way that way, it'll fall to the left. If you twist it all the way the other way, it'll fall to the right.
Okay. I didn't realize that. I learned something today. Thank you.
Well, yeah, I wish we all knew everything. I've learned so much from the Beatties, it's been ridiculous. So none of us knows everything. I always hold the tail up when I go back. If I want to go all the way back there, which I do in this case, I hold the tail up so it won't roll. All right.
One
The
more
next thing-
question there.
Yes.
This thought just been rolling through my mind recently. A lot of demos have shown tails, shall we say, full length equal to the length of the hook. In nature, just looking at pictures and encyclopedias, etc., it seems like the tails, where bugs have tails, those tails are much, much shorter. Why
I
do we
disagree.
tile? Why do we
I totally
tile full length?
disagree. Totally disagree with that. I'm sorry.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, sir. I'll take your word for it.
No. Now it can depend on the bug, I would imagine, but the bugs I see in nature have very long tails. As a matter of fact, one of my all-time favorite tires, Alice Conba, tied her wet flies with tails that were, I'm going to say, 2 times the length of the hook. Now that was a wet fly, so it's a shorter hook. But I don't know. Regardless, you're right in one sense. Tails these days, flies that are in fly shops, etc., are not this long, nor are the wings this tall. Typically, flies are more compact. They look smaller, and that's not a bad thing. Things have changed. This is a fly literally from the 30s. Speaking of which, as I went back to the tail, one thing I should have done, and this is only Reuben Cross liked to do this. So that since this is his fly, I'll do it. He put a turn underneath the tail to cock the tail up a little bit and spread the fibers a bit. Let me see if, well, I've never done that. Art Flick and some other people disagreed with him. But anyway, let's see. We're really gonna get controversial now. I like this is a peacock eye, and I always use peacock eyes. I don't use strung hurl. And the bottom of one of the strands, if you look at one of these strands, if you look at the bottom of it, let me get it here. There is a stem there that protrudes. As opposed to Gretchen, I like to tie these in just the way I tie in ostrich hurl on a full dress salmon fly, which, and in that case, it's critical that the stem leads. And I tie this in just, Gretchen ties hers in differently, and then she goes back over it. I just tie it in one way, and I wrap it like a hackle or like a biot. I do 4 turns of it on a fly this size, and I want the stem protruding because it results. If I'm just wrapping this way, it results in a denser body. In a denser butt, I'll call it. Salmon flies, they call this the butt. Well, that's maybe one too many turns. If you go one too many turns, it's been my experience, and this is the same with ostrich hurl. If you go one too many turns, you can lose the denseness of the last turn. So anyway, like a salmon fly again, I'm going to take the thread forward. I'm going to bind this down. I'm going to flatten the thread because I want to get this stray herl out of here. And I'm hoping I can just bind it down with flattened thread. I want a nice flat area for this. And if this is getting too much in the weeds, I get that. Because I do the salmon flies, I've tried to get into habits that promote their success. This being one, and this isn't an absolute either, but a lot of salmon fly floss bodies are wound two directions. And you know, I always strive to get the best looking fly I can. You know, you can accuse me of tying for the fishermen, and the reality is I do, because they're the ones that buy the flies. So anyway, now I've tried to make this body end up short. Right now I'm trapping this with a turn it in front, a turn behind, a turn in front, turn behind. I tried to stop short of this area here that goes up, because I want that to be hackle. So I just need another one of these. I'm going to wrap it just the way I wrapped the first one. And I always cut some off, and I tie this in by the butt. It'll be bushier if you tie it in by the tip, actually. If you cut some of the tip off, but this is how I've done it forever. So that's how I'm doing it today. And I got to find that stem. There it is. I'm going to try to tie this in so the stem leads when I wind. Oh boy, that's iffy. We'll see if it worked. Yeah, I think it did. I'm just going to go 3 turns with this. Looks similar to the other one. Now, I've heard it said that, I've heard a lot of things said, that you want the width of these to equal the width of the middle. Well, on a some of the wet flies I've done, wet versions of Royal Coachman, that really didn't, that wasn't in the cards. The hook shank was a little too long, and the middle part would wind up longer. I'm going to grab a hackle, and we'll finish this. This is the good side of the hackle facing me. Now, the Beatties are the best in the business as far as I'm concerned with dense hackle. I'm going to try to make this as dense as I can, but this is how they would have tied it back when. Although they might have used 2 hackles, because the hackles weren't dense. They didn't have the barb density that we have today. So they could have used 2 hackles like the Beatties probably do. I don't know. I'm anxious to watch them do this fly correctly. I'll do my best.
I hate to tell you this, Eric, we're sitting here laughing because there is no correctly, I don't think.
No, no, no. And you know, I hope that's a theme. There are no absolutes with any of this stuff. I want to get right up against the back of these wings and then hold everything back and then right in front. And I want to get as many turns as I can, but it might not be too many in the front here. Let me see. Let me get some hackle pliers. I got 4 turns behind and 3 in front. I think that's about as good as I'm going to do. I'm going to take. By the way, this fly you don't leave the space. The classic Catskill space behind behind the eye. You do not leave that on this fly. All right, I'm going to take 2 or 3 turns back and then do a whip finish. And I want to talk about the whip finish just for a second and steal some of Al's thunder because I've heard Al go off on this. And you always want to whip finish back to front. And I have some really nice proof here. I'll show you. Anyway, there is the Quack, a true original Catskill fly. There's what it looks like from the front. I hope you can see that. I'll flip it over. You can see the other side. There's the other side of that. And if you go like this, all the hackle will miraculously be compact, which I like. Let me show you something. This is a whip finish that I did using uni underbody, which Jim would be familiar with. It's used for the underbodies of salmon flies. And you can use a lot of things for underbodies. This is Uni's version. It's very thick thread is the way to think of it. This is a whip finish I did with a tool. And I was just teaching myself the tool for an article I was doing because I've never used a tool. But this is back to front. This was done with the tool back to front. Then I did it with the same tool, the same way, front to back. And look at that hideous mess going across there. So as Al has said many times, and by the way, we've all whip finished this way, all of us. I'm sure I did it for years and years. I've actually changed the way I whip finish. I don't know how many times. At least 3 or 4 different times. I've whip finished every way there is to whip finish, I think. But this is back to front, and that's what you want. Any questions about the Quack? Al, you ready to?
Anytime you want, my friend.
Yeah, that's it for me. That's all I have.
Okay, well, this is the direction that we're going. Doesn't that look a little bit similar to the one that Eric did? In fact, about the only difference that you're going to see is that the tail on this one has got golden pheasant tippets instead of just the straight hackle fibers.
Your body's shorter. Or the red is shorter.
You know, everything is shorter on this one because it's tied on a 1X long dry fly rather than a 2X long dry fly. And that's the way I tie all my dry flies on a 1X long unless the customer requests something different. Now, speaking of customers, when I tie this one this afternoon, I'm going to explain some things that a customer many, many, many years ago got me to thinking about and started doing in the construction of my hair wing flies. And we'll explain it as we get there. But first, I want to point out something that I consider a bit of a mistake, and I'm going to try to fix it. Right here, I want you to notice that the shoulders of my fly, the shoulders up here where the front peacock application is just a little bit thicker than it is towards the back. Bigger shoulders, narrower hip. And that's where I didn't do a good job of hiding the waist from my wings. It's back in here and it shows up, and I would like to see that more like this one. And I'll just hold this one up here so you can compare the two. And you can see there that the body is more the traditional shape all the way through. And I tied that wing different than I did. The wing on the left was tied different than the wing on the right. I'm going to attempt to show you how to do the wing on the right, though it's a real pain in the neck to do when you got a camera between you and your work. But
Hey, Al?
Yeah.
Al, could I make a comment?
Absolutely.
We obviously, being east and west, have different nomenclature. Now in the east, that thing, the peacock herl parts are going to be called, sometimes they call it a tag. In the salmon fly world, the Atlantic salmon fly world, that the back one would be the butt and the front one would be the joint. So anyway,
I just learned something.
terminology.
Yeah.
I've never heard that before, and that doesn't mean though that I didn't lead a very sheltered life and missed all that somewhere along the line.
But it's cool. The shoulder, I mean, the shoulders makes a lot of sense to me. I mean, I've never heard that.
That's my terminology that I made up myself because I've taught this particular maneuver in several classes, and I didn't know what else to call it. So I said, well, as a young man, I had a narrow waist and broad shoulders, and I was in really good shape. And something went wrong along the way, but in my flies, I don't want a big shoulder and narrow waist. I want what I was just pointing out to you. Anyhow,
Hey, Al, in the Atlantic salmon tying world, you'll find that there are 4 words: tip, tag, tail, and butt. And quite often the tip and tag are interchangeable, and some authors refer to the tip and tag simply as the tag. And then sometimes they'll define tip as the farthest, rearest element on there, which is usually some sort of oval tinsel or something. But then you'll have sometimes a tip and no butt, or a tip and no tag, and then the tail. It gets real confusing depending which author you're going.
The Brits will tell you there is no such thing as a tip. It's all a tag, and that's that. And they're emphatic about it. They're insufferable about it.
Yeah, they probably wouldn't like the way I write.
And I would like to offer a comment, and I just got this next sentence or two from Eric a few minutes ago when he said that Rube Cross didn't agree with, who was the other guy?
Art Flick.
Art Flick. 2 very well-known people of the time. So back in the, shall we say, the 30s?
30s and 40s.
Didn't agree any more than we agree today.
No, they didn't.
Why don't you mute those except for me and Eric?
Okay.
Anyhow, and if we're ready to start tying there again, we'll take the spotlight off of Eric there. There we go. And anyway, that's the direction that we're going. And I'd like to try something a little different today, and how I show the recipe, or how I show the materials. First, we'll go to the recipe. And there it is for the Hair Wing Royal Coachman. Dry fly hook. And as you see, my idea of a dry fly hook is 1x long and Eric's is 2x long. Well, there's nothing wrong with that, because there are a lot of flies that have ones that are even longer than that, and some that are shorter. The thread is, I'm going to be using white and black. The tail is golden pheasant barbs. The wings will be calf tail, or it could be bucktail. I've done both. The body is peacock and red floss. And the hackle is brown. And the thread, the head is thread, and it's black. Now, what I'd like to do is, here's where I'm going to try something a little different. I'm going to my materials, and I would, instead of having you guess where I'm going to put my hand next and all that kind of stuff, I'm going to try using my pointer to see if I can't point out the materials a little bit better. And we're going to start with the thread. Right there, we got our black. That's the red floss I'll be using. That's the white thread. Of course, I always use static guard because of the static electricity. Peacock herl. And the golden pheasant tippets come out of this golden pheasant crest. I've got brown hackle already sized over here. So that'll put us, I would assume, I think I've covered, calf tail for the wing. Calf tail right there. And I think that will do it for now. And I will move back to the vise and get a hook out. Now I'm going to remove this guy and just set him aside for a minute. Now remember, my goal here is to get a shoulder. What did Eric call that? Anyway, I'm going to call it a shoulder. You know what I'm talking about. And Eric has a different name for it.
Joint, did he call it
The
the
joint? Yeah, sometimes that joint is what you back at spoke back in the day.
Oh, that's
Jesus.
the butt back.
Anyway, we'll just set this back out of the way, and I'll get a hook in there. And now, before I go any further, I better switch glasses around. One of the things about getting older, I've got 4 pair of glasses here, and they all have a job. And I swear, every time I start something, I need another pair of glasses before I can finish it. But anyway, I'm going to reach over to my materials area, and I'm just going to get the white thread out. We're going to start with white. And I'm going to start right here at the place where I want to place the wing, right there. I'll use that as a dividing point. And I'm going to wrap back a ways and come back. I'm not going to go all the way to the bend. Okay, good. Now, this is one of the few flies that I will tie on a wing before I put on the tail. Otherwise, I always put the tail on first. But I'm going to do that right now. I'm going to get just some calf tail out here. I'll pull a bundle out and cut that off. And I've got a big bunch of that. And the only hair that's of any value to me is this really long stuff right here. And all this short stuff needs to go away. In fact, if I just touch it with my scissors, it starts to go away. Well, I'm going to move over here over my waste bin away from the camera and quickly get rid of all that, so that all I have left are these long fibers that I'm going to stack. And I'll put those into the stacker. And now what I've done here with this is I want to have about half the number of fibers in this part of the wing as I would normally have in a wing. And you'll see why here in just a minute. So I'm getting rid of some of the stuff that didn't stack real good. And I got a broken one over here and some of that. And I'm just going to tie those on so that they are about equal to the hook shank in length. cinch them into place, and bind those down. Now let me trim the waist out. And I want to come back here to what I call the pull point. It's an anchor position where my thread's not going to slip on me because it's to the rear end of the tied in fibers there. Pull these fibers up like this and take a loop under them, because I'll guarantee you those little buggers are just going to do everything they can to go all the way around the hook and end up underneath here, on the underneath side that you really don't want. You don't want them crisscrossing under. Get rid of that right there. Now, I'm going to take and pull that back one more time. Kind of stands that up just a little bit. And now I'm going to move my thread in front of the wing. And I'm going to go back now to my materials and get another piece of the calf tail hair. Just a small amount. I don't need much. Again, about half what I would put in a normal wing. And I'll just get over here, and again, I need to get rid of all of the waste, and there's the waste right there. So I'll just slip over here to my waste bin and get rid of the fuzzy and the short stuff. All right. Now you can see there's a bunch of that went away, and all I have left is these long ones now. Now, before I pull the hair out of the stacker, I want to point out something to you. In fact, go to the offside camera. They can probably see it better from there. I am going to be taking trigger finger, next finger, and the ring finger. That's the one that I'm going to be using next. I'm going to pull my thread out, and what I'm going to end up doing is pulling my thread back, like you're seeing right here, so that my other fingers can get in here and work while holding the thread back out of the way. So just so you know what's going on, that's going to be going on in the background, and you won't be able to see it. Now this is all stacked. Tips pointing to the left, that's what I want. Normally we have the tips pointing in the direction that they're going to go on the hook, and that's just what I'm going to do here. All right, I got that pretty well cleaned up and clean. Now remember, my ring finger on the other hand is pulling the thread back out of the way. I'm pulling the wing fibers up so I can place these directly in front. And now I'm going to reach in with my scissors. Remember now, I've got the thread pulled clear back out of the way, so I don't have to worry too much about cutting it. Not saying that I can't, but probably won't. Now what I'm going to do is bring the thread around, anchor that wing in front there, and I've accomplished a couple things with that. We'll talk about them here in just a minute. But the main thing is that we have an effect going like a person praying. The wings in the back, the wings in the front, they come together and they're holding each other up somewhat. They're going to fight with each other a bit, but we'll take care of that. I want you to also notice that I'm tying on my white calf tail wings with white thread. And in fact, that's what I learned from this fly shop owner. When I first moved to Idaho from California, one of the first fly shop owners that I tied for was a shop in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. And this guy was emphatic that the white winged flies did not have any colored thread wrapped around them. He wanted them to appear as if they were magically there all by themselves. And one of the ways to do that was with white thread. So I'm just going to take this offside wing now and make about 3 or 4 gentle wraps around it. And then I am going to backwards wrap around the hook as I anchor that wing in place. And now I'm going to take the near side wing, wrap around it a few times. Whoops. Come here, you. There we go. And now I got it. And anyway, in the process of capturing the base of both of my wings, I went backwards coming off of the far side wing. Of course, that sets me up for a reverse wrap to get back around the wing that I have on the near side. And so I get going back in the proper direction again, which is up and over clockwise around the hook for a right-handed tire like myself. So let's take a look. We got our wings done. I got one wing just a little thicker than the other one. You know what I'm going to do? There's a commercial tires trick that fixes that every time. It's called scissors. There we go. That's all right. Good. Now it's time for the tail. And I have got a couple selected already off of the golden pheasant crest. And I'll just take one of these feathers and cut off a few of the fibers. And prepare to tie it on as my tail. Now I want to measure it for length so that's about as long as the complete hook. I like a hackle fiber tail, whether it's this type or some other type of feather fiber tail, if you will, that it's a little longer than a hair one would be. And I'm taking a very gentle turn over the top here and starting to wrap part of the way towards the back and then stopping. My goal is to get a placed application off of that golden pheasant without any of the insides showing through. I want just the outsides, the nice pretty color showing through. And notice also that I did not wrap all the way back to the end of the shank, because here's where we're going to make some changes. First off, I'll get rid of the waist. Okay. The other thing this fly shop owner taught me is that you try to have the proper colored hair under the different kinds of material application. And then the next thing that's going to go on is going to be my peacock at the back of the fly, whatever it's called. So I'm going to switch to black thread for that. Set my white thread aside. I don't think I'm going to need it anymore. And I'm going to start wrapping towards the back, continuing on my journey past the white until I get pretty close to the back here.
Wow, that's cool.
Hello. Hi, Orda. You want to speak to Sharon?
All right, now I'm going to get some peacock out of my bundle of peacock over here. And like Eric, I want to tie it in by the base, and I kind of like the ridge pointing up. And that's pretty much the way that Eric did it. But I just kind of set it in right there and let it just kind of roll into place as I roll it over the top and get ready to start wrapping. And I'll set that aside. I'll probably use it on the front in here in a few minutes. But right now, I just want to come forward and I'm going to switch to my red floss now. And I'm using, it's called Nylon Stretch by Danville. Uni calls it Uni Stretch, whatever you want to call it. It's easy to wrap on the hook with a bobbin because it's a stranded type thread rather than anything that'll cord up. You can wrap and wrap and wrap, it'll never cord on you. Now, is that what they used back in the day? Nope. But I got to tell you something that I discovered in trying to find the history of the Coachman, the Royal Coachman or the Hair Wing Royal Coachman. I couldn't find one. I just have to assume that somebody back at about the time when Rube Cross and that other fellow were,
Like,
who's that? Art Flick? Oh yeah, and Art Flick were disagreeing on how to tie the darn fly. But somebody came along and stuck some sort of hair on with this kind of a tail. I mean, it has to have happened. My first encounter.
Elsie Darby tied it just this way, not just this way, because you've got your own fantastic techniques. But Elsie Darby, one of the part of the Darby family, the Darbys and the Deddies were the two first families of fly tying in the Catskills.
Yeah, they were in Roscoe, New York. Does that sound right?
That's exactly right.
Okay. Anyway, so let me get back to my peacock. This piece that I laid down a minute ago, I'm going to see if I can salvage it and use it.
speaking of the Deddies, I think Mary has finally retired.
Yeah. Gretchen had the good fortune of tying at one of the all women's conferences that Fanny Krieger organized back in the day with Mary Deddy Clark. And it was, well, it was quite an experience for her.
Wonderful.
Wonderful experience.
Great lady.
Yes, for sure.
And she was a lady. Is a lady, I should say.
Let's see here. We'll take a look at the. I did a fair job of having narrower shoulders than I did a waist, but I still didn't quite make it. I was semi-successful, I guess you could say. Let me get my hackle out. I've already sized them for a size 12 hook. So I'll grab one here and this one's got a little bit of black in the center and the other one don't. So I'll just put the black one aside and at some time I may need it. Now I've already got the shaft of the feather stripped. Now I'm going to show you another trick of making a really good looking hackle, but with a dense application. This is something we haven't shown a whole lot of people, but we do this so that the fibers are stripped off of the leading edge. And now we're going to talk about which is the leading edge and which isn't. I have the shiny side facing forward towards the hook eye. That means that the leading edge, the part that's going to hit the hook shank first, is going to be bare where I first tie it in. And I want you to notice that I also have bare stem so that I don't have fibers sticking out where I don't want them. Now I'm going to use a Dutch Bachman technique. I've been using it all along, keep forgetting to give him credit for it, but using the weight of the bobbin and thread to keep my turns of hackle from slipping. He used it with peacock. It don't make any difference what you do. The actual technique is really great. I got 4 turns behind the wing, and now the first turn in front of the wing is running into that bobbin and the weight. And what it does is keeps those in front of the wing so that they are nicely evenly placed, tight against each other without any slippage. And whoops, take another turn. Always do 2 turns. Thumbnail, forefinger. We're going to do what we call dog-legging the hackle, which means I'm going to take all that hackle and that shaft of the feather and everything, and I'm just going to bend them back. So you see how that kind of kicks that feather back? And I am going to do a whip finish now. Pull that up tight. Now, when I trim this butt end of this feather off, I don't have to be real careful about it because it's not sticking up in the middle of the head. It's camouflaged back here in the hackle wraps. So I left a little stub there, and well, let's see if you can see the little stub or not. Yep, you can see it if you look really, really good. And most of us on the water, or even when you pick them up in the fly shop, will never see that. But that little stub will gather glue. When you take a drop of glue and you take your fly and you drop some glue in like this, and I'm not putting glue in there. I don't like to put glue around my cameras. Then that will go down in there and it'll grab that stub, and it makes the fly, I won't say bulletproof, but it'll be a little bit more, a little bit stronger. And any questions?
Superb, Al. Man, I love it. I absolutely love it. Some great techniques in there.
East meets west. What do you see that's different to Al's fly from yours, Eric?
Oh, well, his is a much more modern day, much more compact fly than mine, certainly. You guys are the masters of the dense hackle. I love that, the way you finished that as well. I was trying to achieve more or less the same things that you were trying to achieve. It's just the proportions were different. Al's is a lot closer to the, what hackle 1.5 times the gap that you see in books all the time, whereas mine was more right out of the 30s and 40s. And to this day, there are dyed-in-the-wool Catskill guys like Catskill John Bonacera, Alan Podell, shoot. The fellow that used to demo all the time recently passed away. Anyway, they still tie the flies with that longer
Dave Brandt.
Longer look. Dave Brandt, thank you. Yeah, Dave Brandt. And I had the pleasure of tying with those guys at Theodore Gordon event, and Mary Detty Clark was there. Joan Wolfe was there. I tied right beside Art Lee. I had Art Lee's dry fly book growing up, and I'm telling you, what a thrill that was. And he was great. And I bought yet another copy of that book from Art Lee at the show, and he autographed it for me. It was a terrific time. It was like heaven for me. So
to me, there's quite a difference. Not necessarily quite a difference, but one of the differences between East and West has to do to, you look at Eric's fly and you don't see the 3-point stance so much. You see the tail and the hackle tips. Whereas with the Western tie, you tend to see more of the 3-point stance. But you also have, like he was mentioning, the development from the Catskill proportions, and you've got your longer tails and longer hackles, which helps when you're fishing some of the quieter waters that you find back east, as opposed to the rougher waters that you find in the West. And Lee Wolf definitely developed flies for the rougher waters in the West. You've got shorter shanked hooks. You've got thicker hackles to keep the flotation there as best you can on the surface. And back east, you get a lot of wind, and they tended to tie some of their flies to almost mimic what a dandelion seed would look like wisping across a very slow moving stream.
Jim, I couldn't agree more. I wasn't trying for that with this fly. See if I have another one here. A fly like this, for instance, well, shoot. A fly like this, okay? This is in the Catskills style, very, very much. And it, the hackle on this is not dense at all. There's probably 4 turns of hackle on this fly. And it was meant to be ephemeral, dancing across the waters. And you're right about the 3-point stance. They would have pictures of variants in particular, where the hook point and everything was suspended above the water, in many of the old books. So yes, the lack of 3-point stance was certainly there.
There's another thing that I wanted to comment on in regards to something that you said in the longer hackle and probably taking at least 2 feathers to tie the fly. And just to give you what we back in the day, I would say from all the way up until the end of the 80s when Hoffman/Whiting hackle started to become available commercially, we were tying with India capes. And even the very best ones, a typical size 12 fly, let's say a royal wolf, for an example, tied like you just saw right there, would take 4 feathers. You take some of the salmon fly patterns that we tied in the sizes 6s and 8s and 10s, and they would take between 5 and 7 feathers to tie them.
I've got a Met's neck right now. It's supposed to be a grade 1 or something. I don't know. The sweet spot on this neck, in other words, the spot where you don't have a lot of change in width. Okay. The sweet spot where it's not changing too much and you can actually kind of figure out what gauge this might be. Is this a 16, a 14, a 12? What is it?
Mm-hmm.
The sweet spot on this thing can't be, I don't know, 1/4 of an inch on these feathers. I mean, as opposed to whiting where the sweet spot goes forever.
And it's and we used to, that was to getting grizzly was just dang near impossible. You could get some reasonably decent India hackle if you didn't mind using 4 feathers to tie a fly or more. But the stuff that came out of India, none of it was ever grizzly. And I'll tell you what, getting grizzly for a grizzly brown mix, I would avoid those patterns with the plague, not because I couldn't tie the darn things, is because getting the materials was a real challenge. And when we get to later this year, we'll be doing a presentation on Fly Tying Friday of the muddle male fly that I developed in the late 80s. And the reason I developed it is because a shipment of grizzly hackle that was supposed to come through didn't. And I needed to do something with those flies. And I put muddler heads on them and they became pretty popular.
My dad got his feathers from a hat manufacturer in New York City. That's where he got his feathers. And they were tough to tie with.
Oh, Jesus. We first moved to Bozeman and started tying commercial, and we looked at each other and said, geez, we've got these big 5-gallon barrels of feathers that we inherited from her dad. Well, we can't throw these feathers away. Jesus. We tied for 1 week where we were putting 6 and 7 feathers on a fly when we had been tying with whiting and doing 6 or 7 flies on 1 feather. It didn't take long, and we decided that maybe those old feathers needed to be retired forever.
Yeah,
back in the 60s when I tied, the hackle was really tough. I mean, it was super long. A lot of the old flies were tied that way because the hackle was just so
the strand length
was so long.
Somebody started to ask a question.
Yeah, Al, it's Fred. Growing up in Louisiana back in the late 50s, early 60s, there were no fly shops. So I got all our feathers from guy down the street on fighting cocks. And Saturday morning and Sunday morning, I got these brown paper bags were bloody, the losers.
Yeah.
And I would, wash them down and everything and pluck all the feathers that I needed off of them.
Losers.
And anyway, those feathers were, believe it or not, longer than the Indian capes. And they did quite well. Of course, we didn't tie too many trout dry flies down in Louisiana. There were more bass and bluegill. So
That's really.
Anyhow, it's amazing. I remember getting hackle from India. It was a deal where they would show up in not 50-gallon barrel, about 30-gallon barrels. And Frank Johnson and I ordered some in one time. And so I drove from my home in North Idaho to Missoula. Frank had a fly shop at that time in Missoula. And we spent the whole weekend taking these feathers out of this 30-gallon drum, and they were covered with this white powder that was meant to kill everything that came within 50 feet of them. And we washed all of those and got them ready for him to sell in his store. And then I got my cut on them for my commercial business. And that's,
Was there a little whiskey involved?
well, possibly. Yeah.
Knowing you and Frank? Yeah.
Anyhow, I guess we've reminisced enough about East and West. One of the things that I'm kind of excited about is a friend of mine contacted us about this particular East and West adventure that Eric and I have going. And this fellow, his name is Richard Rohrbaugh. A lot of you know him. And he grew up and was raised around Dan Bailey and the Bailey Fly Shop, and is one of the few living people that can actually narrate the stuff that we have to look up on Google. So I'm going to be very exciting at some point in time to have Dick in to just discuss a lot of the things about what happened to a lot of the Eastern patterns once they left Eric's part of the world and went west of the Mississippi and ended up in Montana, in Livingston, in a fly shop there. I mean, it should be a very interesting time. I know that Bailey's Fly Shop, and all the years that I guided, I would say at least 3/4 of the customers that I guided wanted to stop at the Mecca. Where's the Mecca? The Mecca was on Main Street in Livingston, Montana, Dan Bailey's Fly Shop. And yeah, it was, his son had it then. So that was all through the 90s. So Dan had passed, but his son John had it at that time. And
My good friend Bruce Copeland, with whom I've fished my entire life, lives in Bozeman now, and his older brother went to live in Bozeman when we were fishing in high school in the 60s, when Bruce and I were still fishing, and he went to Bozeman then and knew, and I believe fished with Dan Bailey. But you know how they have those silhouettes of big fish that were caught?
absolutely.
Mike Copeland has one of those silhouettes is his, and he caught it with.
Oh, wow.
And
We've
talk
seen
about
those all through that store.
Talk about East meets West.
Oh, wow.
Guess what he caught it on?
I have no idea.
Carrie Stevens' Gray Ghost.
Oh, wow. Yeah, it's amazing. Anyway, what I found the most intriguing thing today was that Art Flick and now I thought the
Rube Cross.
Yeah, Ruben Cross. Anyway, they didn't get along any better than other fly tyers today. I mean, there's a disagreement on how things ought to have been done. I would suspect that whoever learned to tie from Dame Juliana back in 1400, whatever, probably didn't agree very soon after tying with her. He said, no, you don't use wool, you use, and then whatever the heck.
So I'm going to go start dinner.
Okay.
You saw how differently Al and I approached more or less the same fly, I mean, there's always more than one way to skin a cat, that's for sure.
May I ask something about hackle, Eric? This is Jay from the Netherlands.
Oh my goodness! Let's get here so everybody can see.
Jay, I never would have used whiting hackle had I known you were on the call.
Maybe Eric would know back then that didn't the Derby sell hackle they raised himself to people?
I actually
If
bought some Darby hackle in the early 70s, and sent away for it on their site, and got the first two good necks I ever had up until that point.
You probably
I got
would be
with
pretty
a
lucky to
grizzly and a
get
brown.
one of those. Yeah.
Yeah.
You weren't joking at all about joining us at this time of the day. If we made it earlier, would you want it to be earlier, Jay, or?
Well, hour earlier would be nice. It's midnight now, so I got a.
Must be about midnight there, isn't it?
It's midnight here. Yeah.
Yeah, midnight. For those of you that don't know, this is Jay Lee, a dear friend of mine and Gretchen's and Eric's, who lives in the Netherlands. So,
and Jay's one of the best Catskill tires around. Catskill style. He's tremendous.
he's pretty darn hard as a fly tire to beat, no matter who and what kind of discipline you're talking about.
I gotta send out those checks to you both.
Okay, good. Should we keep talking? Maybe he'll add another 0 to it or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let me spotlight you.
There,
that looks like an India hand cape from here.
Boy.
Well, not only that, but when you turn it over, you will see that whoever dressed it out used newspaper. And when you find out where I got it from, this is how the Lady Derby used to dress her necks. She would clean them off, and then she would use newspaper on that side. I have about 4 of these that I got from Frank Johnson.
So is that Elsie dressed them that way? Elsie Derby?
Yeah.
Wow.
And they're really nice soft hackles. These are hens that I have.
By the way, Jim, I got a question for you. Do you think that Elsie Derby did all the work in that shop? I do. Harry apparently liked to go fishing.
Yeah. Yeah. It's probably true. Someday I'd like to get back there. I've talked with people that have visited that Catskill area, and I've read books on it and everything, but I've never actually. I was hoping when we were going to have our rendezvous. Well, there was an Atlantic Salmon Group was going to have a meeting in Syracuse, and it fell through.
Oh,
and I was hoping I'd be able to get back there.
I never got to fish the Never Sink because by the time I was in a position to do it, it had sunk. The ironically named Never Sink.
Uh-huh.
I see in the comments we have Fred. Sorry.
I was surprised that there's several of those rivers back there all of a sudden disappear down a hole and go to New York City.
Yeah. Never Sink was one of them. It's really tragic, but
anyway, I got a comment here from Fred Dupre. He said he came in late because it said 6 p.m. Eastern, and that's my fault. I get confused easy, and it sure showed up in that particular one that I sent out. Anyway, it's 3 o'clock Mountain, and I'm going to quit worrying about all the other times. If you can't figure out where you are in relation to Mountain Time, I guess you won't make it. All I can say.
Thanks, Al.
If Jay can figure it out, anybody can figure it out.
Yeah, the trouble is, Al, on Mountain Time, you keep moving when it is.
Oh, I deserve that.
That's due to continental drift.
Yeah, we did. Eric and I did this on purpose to have an afternoon program because, quite frankly, no matter what evening of the week you try to schedule some type of a fly tying event, you're going up against already established ones that are, have been doing it for quite some time. no matter what night of the week it is. So,
And well, tonight, everybody, or today, people are traveling to the Oregon show in Albany. So I know, like Sherry, she left Sisters, Oregon about, I don't know if she ever made it on or not, but she left Sisters about noon. And probably took
Hey,
some off.
Al.
Yeah.
Al, I know, I see Gary Bagley on here
Yep.
from Cincinnati. And that is precisely where East meets West. Is Cincinnati meets right there. I wonder if we can get Gary on with us one of these times.
I'd be willing to bet you that we can. I was just going to talk to you about that offline, but online would be just fine too.
I don't want to have Jay because he'd show up my Catskill flies.
Oh, okay.
I'm kidding.
I don't know.
Kidding,
I think I'll
Jay.
keep quiet about that one. And anyway, it sounds like having guests sounds like a fun sort of a thing to do. So you won't be stuck with Eric and I all the time. And
Right.
we'll be looking for people to help. And by the way, Gary, in fact, Lou Duncan, I used one of his tips in a recent magazine article I'm working on. In fact, I'm working on it right now. And the Bagley twist ended up in that same magazine article.
All right. Well, thanks, Al.
Except I stole it from you and called it the Beatty twist. No, I
Okay,
didn't. I'm just joking with you. We called it the Bagley twist.
Okay. Appreciate
Anyhow.
that.
Yeah, for sure. If there is nothing else, folks, I think it's about time to sign out.